Welcome to episode 14 of Red Lens, a political photography podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with today's guest. He's someone I wasn't familiar with until recently when I stumbled across a review of his new photography book by a writer that I like, Ron Jacobs. When I read about his book, I decided I needed to immediately go online and order a copy. And when I got it, I was not disappointed. I decided to take a shot in the dark and reach out and see if he'd be willing to come on my small but scrappy podcast. And I was really happy that today's guest responded quickly that he'd be happy to talk. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me for Red Lens about photography, politics, and especially your new book, Portraits of Struggle. Welcome to Red Lens Podcast, Orin Langelle.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me. I think small and scrappy is a way to go. I belong to an NGO that I co-founded, and we're small and scrappy. And if we got paid for the amount of work with money, the work that we do, we'd be rich. But we're small and scrappy, and that's the way you have to be sometimes.
I agree. And I'm definitely going to ask you more about the organization you just mentioned when we get into the interview. But why don't we start with a little bit of your history? You've been a photographer since 1972, I believe, and that's a long time. So I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about what got you interested in photography and what got you started and how you learned. Because, I started photography in the 80s, which was still the film days. And back then it wasn't as easy as it is now with digital cameras and YouTube tutorials for pretty much anything you want to do. Tell us a little bit about your history with photography.
Well, I've been interested in photography, I think, ever since I was a kid. Never seriously though, and finally I became serious, I guess, because I started doing. I wanted to be a regular journalist, and I was a. I mean, this sounds actually kind of goofy, and it was since this is like the beginning of the '70s. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but the co-editor I was working with said, if we believe it, it's true, because back in those days, sometimes you forgot a lot. Anyway, I was working as a editor on a college newspaper, and the photo staff came in one day and they had absolutely nothing. And I said, I really don't think that, you folks are putting your heart into this. And one of them threw me a camera, and I caught it, and I've been taking photographs ever since, and decided it was a perfect way to work into my journalism, to put photojournalism to it, because it just added another a piece of another tool basically in the toolbox to and the more I got going on that, I'm going, yeah, well, this is really good too, because images, in my opinion, you supposedly tell the truth, and there's at least something visual to look at. And after I left that one college, and immediately I was involved in the anti-war movement in St. Louis, and kind of in the United States actually. And in 1972, the underground newspaper in St. Louis actually asked me to go down to Miami Beach, Florida, and take photos of the Republican National Convention. And that was something I did right away. And I hitchhiked down to Florida. I had, I think, a couple of Arguses or something very strange that I don't think they even make anymore. They may, but I hitchhiked down there. I took photos. I stayed with the protesters, and had a very interesting time. And I put together, like it's a photo essay. It was published in the St. Louis Outlaw, and then from there on in, I continued to take photography, all the way to when, I guess, as things started to change on a political landscape. I was in Rocky Mountain National Park and started taking photographs and running the darkroom for the U.S. Department of the Interior in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I was a anti-war protester, so when it was all over with, and the person that hired me said, "I can't believe that you got a government driver's license," and they said, "You have to give it back now." And I said, "Okay." But anyway, I did stuff there, and then I ended up going to Paris, France. Worked on a sort of wasn't an underground newspaper, but it at that time was very small, and it served the expat community. It was called Paris Life, and I one day was in I guess it was Shakespeare's bookstore on the left bank, And I saw a book by that came from the International Center of Photography, and it was actually a book on Robert Capa. And I looked at that and I said, I'm going to have to go here someday. And I actually did. I did go to the International Center of Photography and studied there for a while. And I feel that really kind of set my mind of what I was supposed to be doing in life as a photographer, as a photojournalist, and that was to try and tell as much truth as I could with my camera and my writing and make it stick and not back down from doing that. And sometimes that's gotten me into, a little bit of trouble here and there, as you can imagine, is that, well, I don't know, I guess we all get arrested with a camera when it once we're uh
Indeed.
and so, yeah, I'll leave it at that. But anyway, that's how I kind of started. That got me to the track of the International Center of Photography, studied with Cornel Capa, who was Robert Capa's brother. Robert Capa, for those of you who don't know, was probably at that time one of the greatest considered war photographers in the world, and he was a very anti-war type of person. And I believe, was killed in 1954. He stepped on a landmine in Indochina.
Wow.
So anyway, I got very involved at the International Center of Photography, and then here I am talking to you today with a whole lot that's happened in between.
Amazing, amazing. So many things you brought up that I want to follow up on. So I definitely want to come back to the International Center of Photography and talk more about that. But you mentioned going down to the Republican Convention protests in 1972. So that would have been right around when you were starting doing photography, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
there are photos in the book from that
Yes.
those protests that, if I remember correctly, focused on Vietnam veterans against the war. And so that your book really has pictures from 1972 to last year, I guess. So that's quite a long span. But I would love to hear more about those photos you took in 1972 at the Republican National Convention.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. I mean, I went down there. I know at that time, you really didn't have press credentials or IDs unless you're working for, like, NBC News or some kind of a paper, whatever it might be. But definitely, you don't get press credentials for being able to work for an underground newspaper and be accredited to get into the convention center. Well, I actually ran into some people that were working with Liberation News Service, which was really something great back in those days. I wish we had now. And they had a fake ID from Rolling Stone magazine and signed by Jan Wenner. And so I used that to get inside. I didn't stay inside too much when I was in there, but it was kind of a funny story being in there. I asked a very embarrassing question to the somebody that was talking about how they were doing such a good job in Vietnam and and saving the people from communist stuff. And I said something that I think I got everybody mad at the thing. I ended up seeing John Wayne, and all that kind of stuff from that.
Wow.
We ended up, guy I was with, we went to Young Republicans, had a big soiree, and we went in there. We were pretty scruffy looking. Everybody took notice of us. And one of the women there said, "You know what? You guys aren't really in this. Why are you here?" So we're doing this photo, stuff for an underground newspaper. And she said, "Oh, that means you go to where people like Abby Hoffman and people are." I said, "Yeah, that's where we hang out in that area." And she said, "Can you introduce me to Abby Hoffman? I've got some of the best pot that you would imagine." And I'm like, "Okay." So we took her, we introduced her to Abby Hoffman. I don't know what happened to her, but anyway, she was very excited to meet Abby Hoffman. Yeah, so hung out with people there. It was a very interesting time. It was kind of scary because of the war going on, because of the police. At least they didn't have the RoboCops and things that we see today. They were just normal, ordinary people that were protecting the status quo in the state and from people that were out trying to stop war and were, so that's kind of it. I guess I don't know exactly what to talk about. That one photo, one of the photos I took of a young guy with he's sitting on a wheelchair, and you can see his jeans, but you notice right away he doesn't have legs, and that
Hmm.
kind of says a whole lot right there. And it's something that photograph is kind of always with me because I never want to forget my background of where I came from, and well, I came from a working class family, but I also come from the anti-war movement and totally hate the kind of wars that states have against each other.
Yeah, that definitely resonated. Those pictures resonated with me. One, obviously, for the anti-war, the power of anti-war veterans and the power they had at that time, which has in a lot of ways been sort of erased from history. But setting that aside, myself, the first political convention I went to, and I've never been inside any of them, but just to photograph and to protest outside, was in 1988 in Atlanta, and I've been to lots of them since then. And the transformation, you talked about back then, it was just regular police officers or whatever trying to keep the order. Now they are national security events run by Secret Service, multiple layers of very, very intense security, totally militarized operation. It's really, really intense what those things have become. And in my opinion, that makes it all the more important to continue going to
Yeah.
them, protesting, photographing, etc. But yeah, it's just interesting for me to hear about how the conventions were before that time, even, and when the movements were at a peak, or around a peak, like around that time.
Well, I just want to add real quickly. I never went to another one to try to get inside, but I happened to be at the Boston Social Forum. I want to say that's in 2004, maybe. Now, I would say something like around 2004, whenever the election was with John Kerry and another bozo. But I didn't have credentials to get in, but I ran into some people I knew that were there the day ahead of time, and they said, "Hey, you want to come in and take photographs of the inside of the interior?" And I did, and it was really kind of disgusting because I took photographs going in. It was like all these huge American flags everywhere you go, walking down this I don't know what you would call it, a walkway outside into the building where there were more American flags. And when I got in, there was a big photograph of John Kerry and John Lennon together. And that was when I thought, well, John Kerry, wait a minute. And then thinking, John Lennon, Lennon is rolling over in his grave right now. But that's the last time I went into one of those things. I've been to a lot of other events where I had to have credentials, but
Hmm.
that's just sort of the way that so many things have changed and progressed. You go into something where it was just, the Democrats, blah, 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 to first Republicans, then Democrats, and you find out they're basically all the same party. It's just the party I guess the same coin, two sides of the same coin. But a lot of
Hmm.
people disagree with me on that.
Well, I think I don't disagree with that. They're definitely both parties of the billionaires and corporations, and with slightly different emphases. Definitely no disagreement there. Interestingly, that you mentioned that you were there in 1972 when Vietnam Veterans Against the War were a major player. And then, of course, John Kerry, for folks who don't know, was a leader in Vietnam Veterans Against the War back in the day until he sort of turned into the opposite and became what was he, Secretary of State or Defense under Obama, sort of leading all these wars. And yeah, just sort of his transformation. That's so interesting that they had him next to John Lennon, who also has his more radical politics have also been sort of erased as well over time. Fascinating to see that happen. Well, why don't we come back to the International Center of Photography and get into that a little more? You said went there and you were trained there. I was able to go there once just to visit and saw an exhibit there of the work by Sebastião Salgado focused on workers, and it was just incredible. I was in New York and just went and happened to see that exhibit. And they've also had a lot of other important exhibits there with sort of progressive or even revolutionary content. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about your experience with International Center of Photography.
Well, I was able to study with Cornell Kappa, which was really which was something I really wanted to do. One thing, he was the founder of the International Center of Photography, and he was quite well known in the New York circles, and also he was the brother of Robert Kappa, which I said before that I saw when I was in Paris a book about the International Center of Photography on Robert Kappa and decided I should go there. Well, my job when I was there was basically, but for 6 months, I was supposed to, besides doing any kind of in-house photography, also was to follow an exhibit that was going to take place. It was one of the big, huge, major exhibits that was going to take basically the whole International Center of Photography up, and it was called The End of the Game. And the person who was the photographer for that is Peter Beard. And Peter was beyond. He actually is almost beyond words. Was with somebody else. He has a bad reputation. He had a bad reputation then. Has a bad reputation now, sort of since he died. And as a womanizer and somebody that did a lot of party drugs and things like that. I will not say anything bad about Peter because I learned a lot from Peter. He was very nice to me, and he was just a character and a half. But one of the main things I learned from Peter was about conservation biology. Peter was somebody that spent a lot of time in Africa, hence the word "the end of the game." It was about the dying elephants in Africa, especially in Tsavo National Park, because Tsavo National Park was fenced off, cordoned off, and nobody could go into it but hunters, maybe for wild game or something like that. But the people that lived there for hundreds and thousands of years, the indigenous people, were not allowed in. And so, because the indigenous people weren't allowed to come in, the elephants multiplied. It was a horrible, horrible scene. And to that day, that's still going on with this conservation biology that's prevalent today. I can't remember what it's called, though. There's some kind of a catch word. But anyway, the same thing's happening now. And it's like, this was done. He wrote the book the End of the Game over 50 years ago and had this, he documented, he showed what was going on. And today people are still debating if that's still going on. And I've traveled around the world, a lot of places and doing environmental work. And I mean, he's absolutely was right on about that. And, I just had a lot of, interesting times with Peter. I guess one of the ones I can talk about that's funny, we were sitting in, actually, it was a Christmas time. This is my Christmas story to talk about. It was Christmas time, and we were sitting down in the International Center of Photography. We might have had a cocktail or something, and we were all grubby from working, getting this exhibit ready. And there was a huge tree at the International Center of Photography, and there were no ornaments of any kind on it. So Peter said, "Hey, Orin, get the photograph that you took of me stabbing myself to put blood on the dead elephants on this one shot." And I said, sure. So I went and got it. He took a scissors and cut it all up. There was just blood on an elephant. And then he took a pen and stabbed it and got some string. And then he took okay, there was blood on that photo from that image, but to get blood on the photo, he actually stabbed himself in his arm to get
Wow.
blood flowing on this. And then he hung it up on a Christmas tree. And we were dressed kind of grubby. And I flipped people out that were there visiting the museum because they had no idea who we were. And my guy was stabbing himself. But I still have that photograph. I don't think I have that somewhere. I should put it on a Yule tree or something. But yeah, it was little things like that. Yeah, yeah. I was very fortunate enough. I got to meet people like W. Eugene Smith, a great photographer, photojournalist, who was an activist photographer. To me, he epitomized photojournalism because he said that he could never. He said you can't be an objective photographer. That is not important because you're already you've got something in your head anyway when you're taking photos, so you can't be totally objective. But you shouldn't be. You should be there to try to do one thing, and that's to tell the truth and then get that truth out to a larger audience. And I really appreciated that, and I've tried to do the same thing. And so I met people like Gene Smith. There was so much culture. I was actually one of the few photographers that documented the End of the Game, and I've had some exhibits about it actually on the 50th anniversary of it. And it's actually, I think it's on my website now, but it's called The End of the Game, and you'll see all the kind of people that I ended up meeting, from Truman Capote to Oh, Kurt Vonnegut. Uh,
Oh,
oh,
wow.
Andy Warhol, and went places like Studio 54, and it was all quite different from what my concept of was. But I really was glad I got to do that. I got to be in that art scene. I have not been involved in that art scene anymore. I'm a little bit more serious. Although, like I said, Peter and a lot of these people are very serious, but it was also the glamour of it all. And I won't say
Sure.
that about W. Eugene Smith because he never fell for that. He was always, as he was getting older, he became kind of he was sort of malcontent with the way things were going all the way around and into photography and journalism. And so I kind of picked a little bit of that cynicism up and I carry with that, with that today.
Wow, we'll have to do a whole nother interview sometime about that Studio 54 scene and Andy Warhol and all that, but that sounds really fascinating. But yeah, let me just dig in a little more about the International Center of Photography. And on your photography website, I'm going to do a couple quotes that I found on your website that I found really powerful and compelling, talking about what you were just mentioning, that your role as a photographer is not neutral. So one of the quotes is, "My photographs are not merely a chronicling of these struggles, however, but a call out to inspire new generations to participate in the making of a new history." Yeah, why don't you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's the truth. I mean, we're at such a tremendous point in history right now where there is going to be anything left or not the way it's looking. And I think it's really important, I think, for young people to continue to get inspired if they can get inspired, but to have something in there to fight for that, that not just give up, not just roll over and say, well, it's climate change, it's going to kill us. Well, yeah, it probably will, but it doesn't mean that we don't continue to go out and try to make things better, as much as we possibly can anyway.
Yeah.
And I really think that that's important. That I hope that some young people that see some of my work go, wow, maybe there is a little, at least hope in trying, because I think my photographs do show a lot of, kind of almost. I think you can feel like there's some hope because people are trying to do things.
Yeah, definitely. There's also a phrase that you use on your website, and I think it also comes from that school of the International Center of Photography, the concerned photographer. And you have a quote by Cornel Kappa about this, which reads, "The concerned photographer finds much in the present unacceptable, which he tries to alter. Our goal is simply to let the world also know why it is unacceptable." Maybe this is sort of similar to the what I just asked you to talk about, but just love to hear more about this concept of the concerned photographer and why you find it important. And I'll just say, some people I talk to who have progressive or radical values and become photojournalists don't want to be considered an activist photographer or a concerned photographer, want to try to maintain that neutrality. So why do you think it's important to
Well,
be a concerned photographer?
yeah, I mean, I wear two hats. I mean, sometimes I can act like I'm, just, a regular photojournalist, and then other times, I mean, I'm definitely, it's a lot more exciting if you're, working in activism, I think, and consider that some of your activism is your photography, and it's helped me a whole lot because I've been able to, gain the trust of a whole lot of people. And because of that, I've got shots that that other people haven't gotten. I've been getting tips of where things are going to happen.
Yeah.
I've been behind Mexican military lines sometimes when the Zapatistas weren't letting anybody in, and so it means a lot to me to be able to both. And as much as sometimes I try to deny that I'm an activist, I can't. It's just, this is what I do. I mean, I have a camera. I'm concerned about the world. I want to show what's going on. It's not being covered, and you don't pick up Fox and see, what people are doing really in the streets. Or so we have to have our own media, and we do.
Yeah, I really, really agree. So, other than these sort of historical and general conversations, the main reason I wanted to talk to you on the podcast is because you recently published a wonderful photography book, and it's called Portraits of Struggle, with the subtitle Photos from 1972 to 2023, North and South America, Europe, Africa, Australia, Asia. So first, just I wanted to congratulate you on publishing the book. It's an incredible product of many years of photography and activism. I'd love to talk a little more about the book. Why don't you first just tell us a little bit about it in general? What's in the book?
Well, it's my photography from that started in, I mean, it's some of my photography anyway. It's not all of my photography. There's, it's a very short amount of my photography from 1972 to 2024, taken on six different continents because was lucky enough to been able to travel the world with a camera.
So the book covers about 50 years, and I imagine you must have shot many thousands of photos during that time. So I'm curious how you decided what to include with so much to choose from.
Okay, this is how things are always connected and there's history involved because I I belonged to a museum in Buffalo, New York, where I was living for a while, and it was called SEPA and SEPA Gallery, and it's the largest I guess contemporary photography museum west of New York City. And so I they had a membership show one time where whoever won the show would get an exhibit. And so I won the show with the photograph of the Vietnam veteran in the wheelchair with his legs missing. And I just to put on, okay, what was the show going to be called? And, we talked about it, some of us, and said, okay, well, let's do a Portraits of Struggle. And so that's what we did. We ended up, I had about six different people, from photographers to college professors to activists, and threw out a whole lot of photos. And I asked them, what do you think should be in this exhibit? And then they whittled it down, narrowed it down, and then, I took it from there. Actually, my wife and I, my life partner, and I took it from there, and we came up with an exhibit called Portraits of Struggle. And one of the people that really encouraged me to turn it into a book is Lee Chaudry, who's no longer here anymore. Encouraged me to do that, and I think that because of all the prior work that was done on the exhibit, we decided to just put the photos in for the most part that were in that exhibit. And then
Yeah.
my life partner Ann Peterman, who was the designer of the interior of the book, made the selections, final selections, and we tried to make it work. And I think that's answering the question there.
Yeah, definitely. Many of the people and the movements covered in the book are from indigenous communities and struggles, as well as environmental struggles around the world. So I'd love to hear a little more about that focus. Why the focus on indigenous peoples and struggles?
I think because when I was even back in the late 60s, early 70s, I was very fed up with religion, fed up with the dominant paradigm or whatever you want to call it, and about the planet being, at that time too, it was being destroyed by war. And I ended up reading a lot of indigenous culture, and that gave me hope. Okay, there's something kind of cool here going on with the way that people see the earth and how people relate to it, how indigenous people relate to it. And the more I studied, the more I figured out this was going on worldwide. And these are cultures that, have such a history and a wonderful history, and they're being wiped out because of corporations that want to take their land to make profit off of it. And so I decided that I want to try to tell as much as, get as much info, or at least be able to try to get their words out to more people, that maybe that more people would hear what they're saying about how important it is to listen to what indigenous people are saying, because they hold some keys to how possibly this world could be a much better place if we'd all listened to some of the stuff that they were saying, and their concept of land, their concept of hierarchy or non-hierarchy, or how they're developed, and spirituality are so different than people, from our culture. I was in New Zealand, and it was in a marae, which was a okay, it's a living building that the Maori built, the Maori indigenous people built, and the Maori is a living thing. And so One of the people that introduced it was at a conference was a guy was a Maori, and he talked about the United States and Western culture, and he said, you know, you people are insane. You have one of everything. You have one God. You have one McDonald's. You have one this. You got one that. Everything's one. You have to have just one thing. You can't have more. You can't have diversity. He said, you don't know how many gods we have. We have so many gods. And I just thought that was so funny. And we were with some environmentalists from the West Coast, or actually the mountains in northern United States, and they laughed at this, and it was so embarrassing because they didn't understand this guy's really was telling the truth. So
Mm.
anyway, I really spent a lot of time. I have a lot of respect for indigenous people, and wanted to tell their stories. I think I was very fortunate enough to be able to spend time with the indigenous Zapatistas of Chiapas, Mexico, and we're there, you know, right, basically after they overthrew whatever they were overthrowing and throwing back there, basically trying to get the Mexican military and corporations out of Chiapas, Mexico. And it was very interesting to talk to them and listen to them and to their viewpoint. And I've tried to listen to that, and a lot of times try to promote some of the things that they think too. So I guess that's one of the reasons I've done it. I just found that indigenous people are so interesting, and they've been so shit on by societies at large. I mean, calling them. I mean, I can't believe in my career of how many times I've heard bad names about indigenous people, and it was because of the ignorance, basically, of the white people that were saying that. Like the arrogance sometimes of people in this country, especially in the United States. If you mention the World Bank to most people, I'm not talking about activists, but if you mention the World Bank to most people in this country, they would say, "Oh, well, I think there might be a tele or a machine or whatever, credit card machine right around the corner. You can get money there. It's World Bank, I'm sure." And you go down to a place in Nicaragua in the jungle, and you talk to a campesino, and you say, "What's the World Bank?" And they'll start a litany of all the things the World Bank has done to them, so why their life was miserable, you know.
That's funny because I have a similar story. A good friend of mine who did solidarity work with El Salvador for many years, and she, of course, is from the U.S., but had never heard about the Martyrs of Chicago, the Haymarket incident,
Yeah.
that is still commemorated to this day on May 1st with marches around the world and is like a national holiday in a lot of the world. She had never heard of this, but when she was in the mountains in El Salvador talking to campesinos who were in the rebel army, the FMLN, they taught her about what had happened just a few hours from her where she grew up in the US and who these martyrs were and what they were fighting for. And yeah, absolutely.
No, no, I mean, and today how many people you talk to now, younger people, and you say about the talk about the Battle of Seattle. It just like draws a what,
The,
you know, we didn't learn that in school. No, of course you didn't learn about school. The World Trade Organization was shut down in Seattle in 1999. But yeah, it's amazing people don't know about the martyrs of time of Haymarket, and you know, people don't know about Emma Goldman. They don't, you know, so much of that history is so, you know, it's basically retaught or reinvented by this society to make everybody that was involved in these kind of movements as some evil force, and they're really not. You know, I mean, I don't consider my brothers and sisters out there evil because of what they believe in. And like I said, I came from a working class family, and I think that, you know, so that I had a lot of, fortunately, growing up and having a father who worked, and he couldn't stand working he understood that, you know, what a wage slave was. Let's put it
mm,
that way.
hmm So I'd love to get more into maybe specifically some of the images, starting with, you were already talking about the Zapatistas in Chiapas. The cover image of the book is a really, really striking portrait of Comandante Tacho from the Zapatistas, wearing sort of their trademark balaclava, covering his face. You said you were there kind of early on. I would love to hear about, your experience in Chiapas with the Zapatistas. How did you get? Because I know also I have friends who were there in the 90s, and at least at certain times they really restricted access and just how you were able to get that trust and access to be able to take portraits like that? And yeah, what else?
Well, through the
Anything else?
National Commission on Democracy in Mexico, that is, I don't believe it's along any around anymore. There was a woman, Cecilia Rodriguez, who was working on that aspect, and she was the United States rep, I guess, for the ECLN.
Hmm.
And anyway, there was actually a encuentro down there, and I was invited to come along with some of the other people. I went down and I brought a bunch of people with me, and we went down and hung out in San Cristobal. Then we went to Zapatista territory, and we're fortunate enough to be. To get to go to the headquarters of the EZLN and La Realidad, or the reality in Chiapas, and I was waiting to get some food and what was kind of in a kitchen area, and I looked over to my left hand side and I saw Commandant Tacho, who was underneath a tarp, and the sun was just making the light just beautiful underneath him. It's like a studio shot. And
Mm.
so I got that photograph. I turned around. He looked at me. I looked at him, and I got that shot and was very, I don't post. Subjects. I don't post people in a documentary situation, so that's not a post photo. That's actually a real
Oh,
uh,
wow.
photo. And so yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was very surreal in many ways. I guess it was Easter morning. Or the first time I was in Chiapas, I didn't we were just all on our own and going to different places, and we were at one village, and we went to sleep that night with I believe 8 tanks pointed with their guns pointed to our vehicle,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was from the Mexican military. And so things were a little dicey down there. But
Hmm.
one day in La Realidad, I guess it was a Sunday, yeah, it was. Woke up and there were just all kinds of bangs and sounds and all this stuff going on, and we're going, "Oh my God!" It started, and and it says no, it was the Zapatistas. They were celebrating, Easter. So that
Okay.
and yeah, I could tell a lot of stories about that too, and Marcos and people, but I think I know a lot of stuff. I don't know a lot of stuff, but I have a lot of stuff to talk about.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I mean, you have photos not just from Chiapas, but as you said, the book covers 6 continents, right? Photos from all over the world. Too much for me to ask about every single place, but one thing that I noted though is that it's not just like a travel photography book. It's not just photos from around the world. There are also images of people and struggles in the US and Canada and England, for example. And so just wanted to ask about that. Why did you make the choice to not just have it be photos from other places, but also include struggles within the US, Canada, England, sort of the imperial core countries?
Well, I think it's more like to me, it was like, why did I think I did photos from all over, and the countries just happened to be in the countries because at all countries there's a struggle going on. Everywhere in the world there's a struggle, and that's something that is really overwhelming and very powerful to see when you see it. If you get a chance to see these things like I did, I was very at awe that so many are fighting against the powers that be to try to create a better world or something, some kind of a future. And yeah, it's not just a travel directory, although since it was 6 continents I've been in, we did pick a photograph from each continent to make sure, I could say
Hmm.
that just uh for whatever reason.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would really agree with the sentiment of what you just talked about, that I've had the privilege too to travel and see struggles in a lot of different places, from El Salvador to, South Africa to Greece to other places. And it really does give you hope and give you inspiration in a way that sometimes, if you just are in one place where you live, it can get disheartening sometimes, because all movements have ups and downs. And sometimes when things are in a down, it can get disheartening. But just remembering that there's people fighting in a lot worse conditions than we are all over the world, and they don't stop and don't give up, it really does, at least for me, increase my commitment to never give up, really.
And it's a struggle of everyday life over there
Hmm.
too. It really is. Sometimes we know how, we know it's really bad here, but it's bad everywhere, and it's worse in so many places that it's unreal. I mean, what's going on now in the Mideast, that's hard to fathom that
Hmm.
is, is happening. But and taking it back to the work we do, I mean, man, just journalists, photojournalists, their families are getting killed, and just because they're out there trying to expose what's really going on, and that's kind of a humbling thing to know that that the people that are in the same frame of mind are just being murdered because they're trying to cover something.
Exactly, yeah. So a couple more questions about the book, and then I want to ask about the organizing that you're involved in. So the book includes some black and white photos and some color photos. Some people prefer one or the other, but you include both in the book. So just curious how you decide when to shoot in black and white and when to shoot in color. Is it just like the older photos were black and white so you could develop it in your darkroom, or is there more to it than that?
Well, not yeah, that I think that's one of the main reasons I shot in black and white. Back in the day, is because of that. Because it was easy to develop in my own dark room, and then some of the color toward the end of shooting with film cameras. Some of the color became pretty extraordinary that you could get out of. Well, I mean, some of the color, it's beautiful colors came out of film, and that's one of the reasons I was against, holding out to switch, and I ended up switching. I was actually in Chiapas, Mexico, and was with one of the photographers with us that we were talking, and he was shooting and digital, and he asked me why I wasn't, and I told him basically, what I just told you, and he said, well, my counter to this is I just got back from the Palestine, and the person I was with died, and all I can say is that he learned that it's better to just be able to rely on trying to get electricity or something like that than try to get chemicals. So you can. That's why he switched, just for that reason, and I immediately switched and never. So I went out and got a digital camera, and I've been shooting digital ever since, which was in 2003. And yeah, the only thing I don't like about digital more than anything is I take too many photographs and it becomes a bear.
It's just so easy, right? You can just keep pressing
Yeah,
the button. There's no restriction. That's why I sometimes like to pull out my old film camera and shoot with that because it really teaches you that discipline to wait for the right moment and be able to anticipate what's going to happen. But it's definitely nice to be able to shoot digital, and yeah, you can just take multiple shots and you're more likely to get a good one. But yeah.
I recently just got back from Chile where we're actually doing a documentary that's ongoing right now of the Mapuche indigenous people that are right now in the Mapuche are just really being a lot of them just being rounded up and put into jail. Let's put it that way, because they're in resistance right now they've been in resistance since the beginning of colonization. But it's that resistance has continued, and now they're resisting their land being totally taken over. They lost a lot of it well, they lost their land under Pinochet, but
Mm.
they're trying to reclaim their land, and because they're trying to reclaim their land, their culture, their language for dignity and for the future of their children, they're being considered called terrorists, or being called all kind of things. Well, we went down, and we were interviewing people in prison, in the villages, in the militarized zone, in communities that live this day to day, and getting really great stuff, and learning from their struggle. But doing that, we were sitting in a one of the few prisons that they would let people in, journalists in, or people in the delegation, that they could write something. They had pen, they couldn't record it at all. And
Hmm.
we were at one place where they did let us in to film. And I, for some reason, just decided I'm going to take a black and white photo. And I switched the camera over to black and white and took one photo, and it was like, oh God. I waited right to the right moment and everything. I'm going, maybe this is what I should be doing. Just consider thinking
Mm,
I have, like film in my camera. But yeah, so that's
great. So in the book, there's also a mix of photos of some of them are people at work, some of them are people in their daily lives, and some of them are people involved in protests. Just would love to hear you talk about why you included all three of those types of images rather than just focusing on, for example, protest pictures or something.
I think it's just because of what I said before. It is kind of with a lot of people, their daily lives, and then the protest shots. It's people, I think, acting in solidarity, people acting, like I've got some, photos from different protests from against the World Trade Organization, against the protest in the G8 and things like that. And it was definitely people that were fortunate enough to be able to come out and do things. Where, because of whatever reason, they had the ability to go and protest and sometimes put themselves on the line, where other people that's involved in the constant day-to-day struggle to stay alive, they don't have that they're struggling in a kind of a different way. It's like they don't have that advantage to walk into a protest sometimes and be able to walk back out. And
Mm.
that's not a put down on anybody or anything. It's just that it's that a different mindset sometimes of what people are, what they do. And I have respect for I have respect for people that stand up against the authoritarian regimes that are out there. So
I also really like the pictures of people working, and that's something going back to what I mentioned before, the Sebastião Salgado. I'm sure I'm probably butchering that Portuguese pronunciation, but his photos of people at work, just people doing physical labor are just so powerful, and it's just so fundamental to what we do. But most people don't really think to take pictures of someone just at work, because you're just at work. But you can really show the power of what we have to do every day and how people make the world run.
yeah, exactly. And Salgado, or however you say his name in Portuguese, yeah, he's done a great job with things. He's also done work photographing the landless workers movement down in Brazil. That's really good.
Yes.
Uh, and very
You've been out there too, right? With the landless
yeah,
workers movement, the MST.
yeah.
Do you mind saying just anything quick about that? I've just always heard such amazing things about their organizing.
Yeah, well, well, the landless workers movement, they are legally they're supposed to be able to take over land that is not being productive, and which is really great because that makes sense as some sort of a law. And the problem is what is productive and unproductive land mean? I mean
Hmm.
that's the struggle for the land is always a big thing. So. They take over eucalyptus plantations where there's monoculture timber plantations that are absolutely doing nothing for no one except making money for the timber industry and et cetera, et cetera. So they've been taking over land and and they have schools and I think I don't know how many million people now are associated with the landless workers movement. They have we went to an agroecology school while we were in Brazil last year. And in that agroecology school, then people would go from that school and they would go to other places and try to develop that in their own communities. So everything would be organic and they could, and try to live the best lives they could to their people and to show people what they could do. And they also are the number one largest organic exporters of rice in South America, which is, what really floored me when I heard about that. It was like, wow, these people are basically living in an existence as outlaws in their own land, and doing this and feeding people and doing it all organically. And at least the people we saw, I'm sure that there are communities that probably don't have when they're starting out, have the ability to do organic. But that's had a lot of respect. And I'm actually just finished a photo essay on that trip down there, and there's a landless workers farmer Romaldo, and he was saying something about talking about we're the MST, we're the real MST. Whether we win or lose, we're still the MST. And I thought that this was a great talk about struggle. Whether we win or we lose, we're still who we are, and we're going to still continue fighting. So that's kind of spirit I like to see, and that's kind of the MST right there. And also, they have when we were down there, we were with people called, they call themselves insurgentes, and they would be the people that would go and radically stir up trouble and stuff in other places. And I guess in 2017, we were down there and taking photographs of the forest fires that happened in Chile at that time, and we were interviewing a woman insurgente, and I guess one of the women asked her, well, you just did something really important on International Women's Day. What did you do? And she said, well, we took over a nursery and we destroyed all the property in it, including all the genetically engineered trees. And she said, it was matter of factly. And it wasn't like, this is like, well, look what we did. It was just like, well, we just went out and this is what we do. The women, we had 1,000 women. We went there. We destroyed everything because it's bad. There's no, why should there be there? So, uh, that's
Yeah, I
quite a
mean,
movement down there.
and that's exactly the what I'm thinking about with, for example, we have Trump coming into the presidency here. It's going to be a very bleak situation. Obviously, a lot of bad stuff's going to happen. But when you know that there are a million people organized in Brazil who have organized through Bolsonaro being president, a sort of neo-fascist president before the current one, and how can you not be inspired to keep fighting? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It was very good to see that, and again, it was very good to see the people in Chile not giving up and trying to get their land back, and there are people all over the world trying to do this good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you here all day, so just a couple more questions and then we can wrap it up. But so, I find it inspiring that you're not just a documenter of movements, but also a participant. You're the founder of the Global Justice Equality Project. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that organization's values and work?
Yeah, the Global Justice Ecology Project, my life partner, I, Ant Peterman, started it in 2003. We started working together basically in 1991 together, and it's been sort of like us, starting out doing things together and working with different organizations and having organizations that didn't work. We finally came together and said, hey, look, let's put our own organization together and we'll do what we think it should be focused on. And we'll have the kind of a mission statement where we can have mission drift, and that'll be part of our mission statement that we can do whatever we think we need to be doing.
I love it.
Little anarchical thought there. Yeah, well, we kind of founded this on three principles, and one was showing the intersections between ecology, economics, and sociology. And those three are very intrinsically tied together on just about everything that is out there. At least we can find just about any issue if we want to work on it, and we can show those connections. And it's very good to know that there are those connections out there because it's sometimes people want to think we're up against this big thing, and we are, but it's almost how funny that you're taught ways like in the anti-corporate globalization movement, everybody's talking to the media saying, "Oh, you just got a dirty laundry list of thousands of things," and yeah, well, yeah, we do. Thousands of things are wrong. But I think boiling it down into just a few simple things, we can talk, we can really dissect that and talk to the media or write papers about it, or, just talk to people and, do photo essays, do documentaries. And that's what we've been doing. We actually got very much involved in the climate justice movement because we were very much worked together in the globalization movement. And that was very interesting at that time period. And then we moved into a climate justice situation where climate justice was kind of just getting off the ground. And it was something we were very much interested in because of doing the work were doing. We were seeing all kind of economic and or a lot of environmental collapse going on all over the world, and seeing how these things just aren't good. So we got involved with that. We ended up going to a lot of UN meetings. Finally, got to the point in Copenhagen in 2009. The 30th to 20th anniversary of the Battle of Seattle, and it was in November. And then we decided with a lot of people that maybe it should be shut down. But that didn't happen, and people were afraid of doing that, saying, "Well, if we shut this down, people say that we're trying to destroy the process of, saving the
Mm,
planet." We're going, no, we're having alternative summits to discuss what's really going on instead of having corporations tell us how they're going to solve the planet because they're not going to do it.
mhm,
So we've been very much involved in doing that. I think right now we're doing more documentary work and dealing with not necessarily. We were more involved in protests when we first started out than we are now. Now it's more strictly it went to what we have. One of the big things that this organization has done is we've stopped genetic engineering of trees. So far, where they're not around the world, we have basically shut them down, but I don't know how long that's going to last because Brazil has just legalized 9 traits of, I believe, of genetically engineered trees. In this country, they're trying to bring back the chestnut by genetic engineering, and here it'll go right back to what an indigenous person with some of their wisdom. One of the people we were talking to about genetically engineered trees, he said, "Well, they're not a tree. They have no soul." And that's a pretty good way to understand it. So that's a little bit of what we do and what we're involved in.
thank you for sharing that. So, just wanted to get to sort of the obligatory question about camera gear. I know before we talked, you had said you're not really a gearhead type person who loves to have all the latest gear or whatever necessarily, but I'm interested, and I wonder if other people are interested when you do portraits or when you're out doing documentary photography. What kind of camera do you use? What lens do you prefer? Things like that.
Well, I try to shoot everything with a pinhole camera.
All right.
If it was up to me,
Back to basics. I love
back to
it.
basics, Ned Ludd was right. So, no, I started out with Nikon cameras, and I think it was 1969. I no, it's actually in 1970, early 70s. I got my first Nikon equipment, and I've been using it ever since. And it's been that's what I know, and that's I know how to shoot that and to deal with it. I don't I know that to me, photography is it's a study of light, and it's also an extension of your eye. And I've shot photographs with point and shoot Nikons that have been in magazines before, and people say you can't do that. You have to have all this fancy equipment. You really don't have to have all kind of fancy equipment. I mean, I have to say now I finally got to work my way up as I'm kind of my career is sort of now being put into books and things like that. But I just got a Nikon D850, which I really like, and I've been shooting with that and with using a Nikkor. I believe it's an 18 to 120 millimeter zoom. And prior to that, yeah, so I shoot with a zoom more often than not. And my work that I do, like I said, I don't pose. I do have a little bit of history back in the 70s, or no, back in the 80s. I took a break from journalism and did some fashion photography, and I still use Nikons, but it's a whole different thing. That was what actually, you pose people and things like this. What I do,
Yeah.
I don't pose people. I might be in a situation where, like I said, sometimes photos look like they're posed, but they're not. This is something happens, and I'm sure that I've taken photographs in documentary where I've posed people before, but I can't. It's just something that I would rarely do. I do believe that there's a decisive moment, like Bresson said. So,
Mm.
and Henri Cartier-Bresson, one of my heroes or whatever. So yeah, I really appreciated Nikon cameras, Nikon photography. It hasn't broken down on me out in the field. I do carry another camera body, high quality camera body with me, and other lenses because I have had things break down in the field before and didn't have a backup. I ended
Mm.
up on one trip to Brazil shooting with a wide angle, a fisheye lens the whole trip, and got some wild photos. But something it worked out. uh,
I recently got a fisheye lens and I just haven't taken it off my camera. It's so much fun. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about as if you're doing documentary photography, a zoom lens is so much better because to capture that moment, you can do that much easier if you don't have to zoom with your feet every time, and you can
yeah,
do a wide angle shot. You can do something longer. Um,
yeah. And I was hesitant actually with to go to the D850 because I had to change lenses and get different Nikon lenses. But one of it was using the 24 to 120. I'm used to shooting something that goes up to at least 200 millimeter. And a photographer friend of mine who had one before, he was encouraging me to get this, and he said, well, you don't really need that because you've got like, you can take some of this D850 stuff will do 50 megapixels or stuff. So you can blow things up. You don't need to, you could, and yeah, I can back them up on that. You really can, you can get a lot out of it. And it's
mm,
amazing. That actually has been one of the greatest cameras that Nikon supposedly has built, and I don't think they make it anymore because they went all to the Z series, which I'm glad I have what I have. I probably will never worry about another camera unless I get another one of these for a backup or something.
Yeah, and I've have very little experience with Nikons. I have a Sony for my digital camera. My old film camera is a Canon, but I really like the spirit of what you said before. That I've heard the phrase, "The best camera is the one you have with you." It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Any really modern camera, really any old film camera with my Canon AE1, I can take amazing photos. And so the best camera is the one you have with you, whether even if that's your phone, you can take
Exactly.
amazing photos.
You can get great photos these days with the phone. I mean, I used to have to carry cameras around with me when I would go anywhere. I'd have a camera to go to the store. Well, now I have a phone once I go to the store. And I can shoot what I would have to shoot. I wouldn't want to do it on a trip to another country to rely on it. But I mean to know that you could do spot news. You can if there's something happening, you can even switch it to movie real quick, and
Hmm.
which I don't shoot anyway. I just sit to still. It's
Yeah.
what I'm used to.
Well, why don't you let folks know where people can find you and your work online and how people can get your book.
Okay, well, I guess the best place to go would be to go to my website, which is my last name, Langelle, Langelle, photo, photo, would be dot org. So that's basically it. LangellePhoto.org, and also you can get my book there. I believe the website right that book lives on though is Portraits of Struggle, just the whole portraits of struggle, all words crammed together.org, and then there's Global Justice Ecology.org that will talk about the other part of what I do. And I mean, I shoot for Global Justice Ecology Project. So I think those three things you should be able to find something.
Amazing. Thanks. Any last things you'd like to touch on that we didn't get to?
Well, I probably just mouthed off too much and we missed a lot of stuff I think that we were going to talk about, but actually I think we did do most of the stuff we talked about talking about, which is good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think I mentioned in the beginning maybe the political situation we're in right now of we're in these horrendous wars that that look like whether they stop or not, I don't know, but I've never seen I don't think we've ever seen a genocidal war like we're seeing now, getting as much attention as it has. It had. I don't know. I follow it. I know it's my now it's the holidays, so I'm sure that we're not going to see much of anything real on the news. But yeah, and I really have a lot of feeling about the journalists over there that are being killed. And I know, the kind of work that I do is also considered conflict photography because I'm in a situation where there's militarized zones or I'm behind, military lines or something. And I've done things in my life, in my career that I look back and I got some really great photos, but I probably wouldn't do it again because I did some stupid things to get some great shots. But were they stupid? I don't know. It's just that was my thing. And but I wanted to go to El Salvador actually to when the conflict was going on there, and I wanted to photograph, and I actually almost had an in to go down there, and then it just didn't pan out. And I had an in to go to look at the Iraq War, and I was talked out of it, which is good because I guess I mean when it comes to the Iraq War or photographing rebels in the country, I'd photograph rebels because it's different than nation states. There's different kind of wars going on all over the place, and
Hmm.
you got to choose your battle sometimes. But it's like, oh, who said this? Noam Chomsky, or maybe not Noam Chomsky. So I won't bastardize what I was going to say. I'm getting it totally wrong, but it's something about you can't be neutral on a moving train, and it
Mm.
is the truth. And our Paulo Ferrari said. Too, that there's basically two sides, and you got to kind of pick one that you're in. And I'm very happy with the side that I picked. I'm very happy to say that I'm still going and have not sold out. But I do worry about what's going to happen next a whole lot. Things are just getting so bizarre. It used to be there was like maybe one spectacle going on that you could pay attention to, and now all kind of spectacles are going on all over the place all the time. That becomes a spectacle in itself. It was like zoom, zoom, zoom. What's going on? And all this technology has, driven people, over the edge. I think, and now we have AI coming up. I don't know. I don't know what to think of AI, except that it's something that I think is going to really continue to screw humans over and to screw the potential of actually doing anything well. But I'm amazed at what AI can do already.
Mm.
And I don't know. I do have on Global Justice Ecology Project. Steve Taylor is a videographer I work with, but he also has a show called Breaking Green. And it's a podcast. And I will turn him on to your podcast, Brad, and I'll turn you on to his. It's called Breaking Green, and this is his fourth season now that he's in. And the last person that he interviewed was a person by the name of Jim Thomas. And
Hmm.
Jim, I go way back for a lot of things, but Jim Thomas has been spending and investigating artificial intelligence, and he's an expert on his field. And anyway, he is now trying saying that he started a group called the New Luddite to be against artificial intelligence. And so, Steve, the last question that Steve asked him on the podcast was, well, what do you think needs to happen now? And he said, well, I think we have to have the new Luddites, and we better start going back to Earth first. And I thought, well, that's a pretty wild statement from somebody but anyway, yeah, I'll be quiet now. I'm talked out.
No, I appreciate it. That's a wonderful thing about podcasts. It's a place where you can do long form conversations and get to hear more in depth. So I really, really appreciate you sharing all your thoughts and really appreciate you being here today to talk to folks. And I'll just mention again your website, Langelle photo.org. Folks can go there to see Orin's photography and link to buy a copy of his book, Portraits of Struggle, which everybody should do.
And Brad, I thank you for having me on. As soon as I saw what you were doing and trying to do, I was looking forward to being on Red Lens because I thought this this is probably where I need to be on. So I appreciate the opportunity to rave.
Thank you so much. You can support Red Lens Podcast by supporting my Patreon. Go to patreon.com/SiegelPhotos, SIGALPHOTOS, and sign up for a small monthly donation. That will go a long way in helping sustain the podcast and my work as a political photographer. Thank you for checking out and supporting Red Lens Podcast.